Sorry about that. Just checking real quick. Is everyone okay with this event being recorded? It looks like everyone's all good, so we're good to go. Sorry about that, but we haven't really gone into any of the important stuff yet, so it should be all good. So starting off with the importance of a UX resume, the resume is is sometimes overlooked with UX stuff just because there's a lot of emphasis that is put on your portfolio and your portfolio projects and all of that. And so a lot of people don't really think that your UX resume should look any different from a standard resume, but there are some key differences that are made between a normal resume and a UX resume. And first off, starting off is just your UX resume is kind of your first thing that companies are going to see. And that's something I think a lot of people tend to forget. Yes, your portfolio might be amazing, but if your resume is not up to par, it's not going to get through the scanner. And that's kind of normally companies' first way of even deciding if they want to go through the first round of interview with you, because most companies, especially the big companies, don't have someone hand going through all their applications, but they just have a scanner. And so you want to make sure that your resume is up to par in that aspect, but it's also kind of a really quick overview of who you are. A lot of other things like your portfolio. I'm going to say that a little bit throughout this just because your portfolio is such a big part of a job application, but your portfolio, it might be a lot more detailed. It's going to have a lot of different projects on it and a lot of different pages. As for your resume, is really just like a one pager all about you. And so you want to make sure that you have your skill sets, your leadership skills, and just everything all compact in one place. You also want to make sure you're quantifying your design impact. You could have literally a year worth of experience, but on your resume, it's just going to be 3 or 4 points. And so that's really how important it is because it's showing all these big things in such a small space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so here's some of the key differences that we're talking about when we're referring to a UX resume versus a traditional resume. On the left-hand side, you can see what we mean by a traditional resume. And this is typically what people will tell you to build your resume like if you're going to any kind of resume building workshop or just a professional development event. You'll have your certain sections and it'll just be listed in a line in a very strategic way so that, everything is just there. But on the right-hand side, you'll see a UX resume. And it's interesting to see because it actually has the same amount of information that's there on the traditional resume, but it's a lot easier to just take one glance at and get a lot more information from it. For example, even looking at the name, you can see that Thomas Sang on the right-hand side, his name stands out a lot more than the other name. And there's just things like that you can really showcase your user experience skills through the way that your resume looks.
Exactly. And so just zooming in on that real quick, this is just the same resume cut in half, zoomed in, so you can have a real deeper look into it. There's some clear things here that are different from the other resumes. So one is personal branding. This is something people commonly do where there's a font that you use in your portfolio that's like your big header font or a font that you really like. You should add that to your UX resume, which is something that a normal resume might not tell you to do, but like fonts like this are allowed in a UX resume. It's also a lot of emphasis is put on storytelling. So as you can see, there's this paragraph here about this guy's experience and how he got into design. Mhm. Sorry, did someone say anything? Okay, I'm just going to continue. But there's a lot of emphasis on storytelling in your actual work experience. And so if you can do that on your resume, it shows that, you're a good storyteller. There's also icons. Icons are fun. They add some value to it as well. And it's something that's also commonly used. And a skills and tools section, definitely a must. Just overall, there's a lot of small little changes and a lot of white space and stuff that you might not normally see, but it's really important with this. So
Yeah, so getting into some of the specific sections on your resume, the experience section is obviously one of the most important sections in your resume. This is where you're going to showcase all the previous jobs or internships or any kind of relevant experience you've had for the specific job that you're applying for. This is where you would list that. So one thing that you can do for a UX resume as opposed to a traditional resume is showcase those storytelling skills. Like Simran was saying, storytelling is very important in UX, especially for the research side of it and making sure that you're solving the right problem and you're able to explain your issues. So that's one thing that you can do in your job experience section as well. Typically, people will tell you to use bullet points and just kind of list certain things that you've done in your job. And you can totally do that. That's up to you. But if you want, you can also tell it in a story, and that will kind of show your recruiter that you have those storytelling skills that you're just listing in your skills section. Another key important thing is to quantify the impact of your designs. And what that means is essentially just giving you numbers and like kind of showcasing the impact of your designs. So, for example, if I had an internship, a UX internship previously, I can say that, I was in this internship and my designs increased engagement by 37%, as opposed to just saying, I made some designs to add to this application. And that's just important to give your recruiter kind of better perspective of what that job experience did for you and how it can be applicable to the job that you're applying. Um, and again, like Simran said, a lot of these companies use scanners for your resumes, especially the bigger ones, because they get hundreds and thousands of applications for every single application that's open. So it's really hard for one single person to just sit there and kind of go through every single resume. So they use something called the ATS, which is a resume scanning system. And what it does is the recruiter will program certain words into that ATS, and it'll scan through your resume and look to see if you have those keywords in your resume. And if you do, then you will be forwarded on to the recruiter and they will actually take a look at your resume. And if you don't, sometimes the recruiter won't even look at your resume and it'll just kind of be left into the void. So, one way to kind of overcome that obstacle is to really look at your listing and see what kind of like verbiage they're using and what they're really looking for, and make sure that you use those words in your resume as well, in order to make sure that you're getting past that ATS, and then they can actually look at your resume.
Yeah, and I know just one way that I did this when I first started is I literally went onto LinkedIn and I searched up UX design internship and copy and pasted the job descriptions from all of them onto a Google Doc. And then I think I copied like 10 or 15 of them. I think it was 10. And then I made one of those word bubbles. There's like a lot of tools online to make a word bubble. And all the big words I tried to tie into my resume as much as I could. So that's just one way you could do it. You can also like customize it for each job. Totally up to you, but yeah. If, for example, you may not have that much experience or you think you don't have a lot of experience, there's definitely a lot of things that you can add that you might already have. So this is, for example, leadership or relevant volunteer experience type stuff. So if you're in a school org, like we're both in CTD, so we might add CTD to our resume. If you've helped out in a nonprofit, that's something that you can add. Just things like that can still show, especially if you find a way to tie it back to design. So like, for example, Nidhi, you're a marketing officer. If you were to talk about how, even though you're a marketing officer, you've done a lot of stuff that's got people's user retention and, just those type of skills, then that would still be relevant enough and it would still feel like something that could be used. Another thing is relevant projects. And so this is something that at any point you can start a relevant project. You could literally do anything that you wanted to, like start just designing something, or you can go to hackathons or stuff like that. And those projects could definitely be added to your resume as something relevant. And you could talk about your experiences, like collaborated with a team to do this and stuff like that. This is also incredibly great if your portfolio, for example, is not exactly finished yet or completed, because that way they can still get a little glimpse of the work you've worked on before.
Okay, so here's a little practice exercise for you guys. How would you quantify being a marketing officer for CTD on your resume? You can take a second to kind of think of some bullet points that you would use and then go ahead and drop it in the chat. And since it's just a practice exercise, you guys can just come up with any kinds of numbers. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, we didn't give any numbers to go off of. So anything that you think that an officer would do that's relevant. that would also quantify it. So the big thing with
Yeah.
quantifying is adding numbers and percentages, and not just any numbers and percentages, because I could be like, I worked in a group with 4 other people, but I don't, most likely they're not going to care about that as much as I helped this many users come to this and do this thing, or this many people come to this and do this.
Or like I increased engagement by this
Yeah.
percent. 332%. Love that. Well, percentage numbers can come from anything. Like if you have, in some jobs, they track like how much percent people increase certain things by. So if you have those statistics, that's totally fine to use in your resume. But if you don't, you can also do like, for example, created ads that this many people saw, like, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question to bring up, just because a lot of times you won't get as easy access to the numbers, or you like a project, for example, you don't know how many people have used it because most likely it's like in the starting phases, you designed it, maybe made like a first iteration, but it's not like a crazy big app. But there's still things, small things you can add, like you said, or like for example, once again, going to the marketing officer one, like hosted workshops that this many people attended and adding a number there, just stuff like that.
Yeah, like especially for, in the beginning of the quarter when you're doing like OPERS or something, like this many people attended OPERS, so they most likely saw your ads that you put in there. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like a rough eyeball thing.
Yeah.
But if you do have exact percentages, that's definitely useful.
And if you don't think you have it, don't worry. You can definitely just make it a goal in your future projects to look for those type of numbers and collect that data. For example, if you're working on something that's like a website, Google Analytics will tell you a lot of the stuff that you might not even realize, like how many people are clicking and how many people are staying. So there's easy ways to find the data if it's not given to you, and even like go in your next projects looking for that data.
Mhm.
But anyways, back to this. Here's some that we came up with.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
oh yeah, so Marini can go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying you can go.
Okay, okay. So here's some examples that we came up with. Spearheaded advertisement efforts to 800 plus students to join the club. So again, that's like going off of Oprah's Fest and like, the beginning of the school year recruitment. And then produced large scale social media campaigns, generating hundreds of daily views. So that's something you can get from, your story views and things like that. How many people follow you, you can generally estimate around that. And then designed branding assets that increased engagement on social media by 17%. So that's a little more specific and it might be a little harder to find, but if you can find that information, that will definitely give you more of an edge.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so going back to the relevant project section that we kind of touched upon earlier, this is something that you can also include on your resume, especially if you don't have a fully blown portfolio yet, that you want to share to your employers. If you've done certain case studies, redesigns, market research, anything that's relevant to the job that you're applying for, you can totally include it here and make sure that they're relevant and show some kind of skill that the recruiter is looking for. Again, this especially and everything else on your resume should be something that you're ready to explain at any point in time, because anything on your resume is basically free game for recruiters to ask you. So if you get into an interview and they ask you about a relevant project and you are not able to explain it, then that kind of looks really bad on you. But this can also be group projects. There's nothing wrong with group projects. Just make sure you're ready to explain any kind of questions that they have.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a really good point you bring up about talking about things. Very often, some interview questions will be something like, "Oh, I see you did this." Or I had one time where they literally read me a statistic, like a number, like a quantifying thing. They're like, "I see you did the user retention by this many numbers. Can you tell me more about that?" And if you're not ready for that, that can be definitely kind of make you look suspicious and like you're kind of lying, which is the last thing you want your resume to come off as. So. Another big thing that we talked about earlier is tools and skills. So this is a really important part of any resume, but I think the thing with design is that there's very specific schools, great, no, skills and tools that you should mention. I know on a traditional resume, some really common ones are like Microsoft Word and like all of that stuff, but there's some other tools that are way more important. And so with design, there's Figma, Illustrator, Sketch, whichever ones you're comfortable with, obviously. Don't just list them there, be like honest with yourself. But having those design tools, and if you're not comfortable with them, we do have workshops on them, but having them is really helpful because that kind of tells a company, like, let's say this company uses Sketch. If you say you have Sketch on there, it just kind of boosts your application that you already know how to use it. Some dev skills that might be helpful is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React sometimes. The thing with these dev skills is that they're not really going to test you on these. At most, they're maybe going to ask you like, oh, how comfortable are you with it? But it's not as directly applied, but having it is always a nice little boost. And some roles do actually want you looking at it a lot more than others. And then others, these are more of skills than tools. The other ones were more tools, but some really relevant skills to have would be wireframing, storytelling, market research, need finding. These are things that kind of come off as more like almost soft skill type, but actually they are pretty relevant to have on your resume because just in case you don't have them anywhere else, having them there can give you a little boost in your resume. And most likely you, if you've worked on a UX project, you have done these things before. So.
Yeah, and also just to add on to the tools, again, like Simran said, workshop week is definitely a good place to build those tools and
Definitely.
skill sets that you can add those extra things onto your resume. Um, so yeah, so going into your About You section, this is obviously very important. The two main things that you definitely need to highlight in this section is your name and two forms of contact, just so recruiters have options. On my resume, I have my email, LinkedIn, and phone number, but if you guys prefer a different method of contact, just make sure you have at least two of them. And those should always be at the top and very clear to see. Some other things you can include in the section are your education. Major in school is definitely important. You can also include your GPA if it gives you a better footing in that competitive pool. But if it really doesn't, then it's definitely something that you do not need to add on there. And one tip that we have when you're looking for jobs is if you are looking for an internship, then you should include your education towards the top of your resume where they can see it a lot easier. And if you're looking for more of a full-time job, then you can include your education section towards the bottom. And again, if you're in school and you're looking for an internship, relevant coursework is also something that can be useful.
Yeah. Some final tips for you. This is just kind of summarizing everything and going over it. Show, don't list. This is one basically where you want to show your impact, show what you did, and not just like list them. It's really easy to have done all the right things, worked on exactly what this company might be wanting you to do in their job, but still not write it the right way. So be sure to show your impact, show everything and why your design was great instead of just listing what you did for the project. Reach out to others. So this is one that I think people don't really talk about, but if you can find anyone who maybe is already at the company that you're applying, who you're interested in, like someone in a similar field or similar position, and you can talk to them about it and maybe show them your resume and tell them if they can help you out and make it better, or just anyone older than you who has experience. This is something that can be really helpful because people who have experience in the industry can obviously look at a resume and help you kind of make it closer to what you want it to be. Also, to highlight relevant work, like I said, you can do the most perfect project and still not highlight the right things. So make sure to look at the job descriptions and line it up with your resume to make it as relevant as possible. And then lastly is just to get involved in any way you can. I know that this time of the year can be really discouraging to a lot of people when people are applying to internships and rejection emails are coming in and it feels like you just aren't experienced enough yet. But there's still tons of ways to get involved and there's tons of ways to make your resume, more full of stuff. And there's tons of ways to still, it's not over yet. There's still so much left and there's so much you can do. And so if it's like helping a nonprofit and helping them redesign their website or just like doing your own side projects, there's tons of things you can do. And don't get discouraged by seeing everyone on LinkedIn or seeing all your emails of rejections because there's still tons of opportunities out there. Oh.
Yeah, so I definitely 100% agree with everything that Simran said in the last slide. And here are some links that we've provided for you to kind of help you get started in those things. I know Simran said it's really important to reach out to other people, and that's definitely a good thing, especially if you are looking for a very specific job. Like, say, if I want a UX internship at Google, one way that I can like help myself get a better footing in that applicant pool is to ask people that work as UX interns at Google, and see if they have any advice for you or if they did anything specific that, you can do to also help you get a better footing in that pool. So one place that you can do that is Cofolios. Cofolios is like a website that's kind of created for designers by designers. And it showcases a lot of people's portfolios. And on there, you can also find their resumes. If you're not looking for specifically portfolio help, you can look through their portfolios and kind of see their resumes and see what they've done and what companies they work at and see how you can apply that same stuff to your resume. Another helpful resource is Resume Worded. And that's just to help you write certain points in your resume. And, if you're not like the best writer and you are not sure how to write everything correctly, you can definitely find help through this resource. And then another resource to help you in your job search is interns.design. If you're looking for a design internship, a lot of them are showcased on interns.design. And it's really cool. It kind of is self-updated and you can see when new applications open and when old applications close, and you can see what current applications are open right now and what you can apply for. So yeah.
Yeah, I've personally definitely used all three of these. Something really cool that Resume Worded does is you can upload your resume onto it and it'll rate it. I don't know how accurate the rating is because it's not like focused on design, but it'll tell you that you need to add more of this. Like a lot of things are to add more quantifying impact, and then just like little things here there. It also tells you kind of roughly how scannable it is because I know one time I put my resume in there, I got like a 5 out of 10, 5 out of 100. And then the second time I put it in there, I changed the format and I got like way higher of a score right away just because it was suddenly scannable. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Also,
Um,
yes, we can,
yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah, we can
I
link
would,
everything in the Slack later, as well as we'll send a email out with this recording and the links as well.
yes. Yeah, so that's kind of the end of our little presentation. If you guys have any questions, we're totally willing to answer those. And you guys can just drop it in the chat. If anyone wants to be added to the email list, you guys can just put it in the chat and then we'll go through it. Put your email in the chat and then we'll go through it afterwards and add you guys. Can you define what experience counts for the storytelling skill? So that's not like a specific experience in itself, but it's a way to kind of showcase what job experiences you've had in the past or what kind of leadership experience or any kind of experience at all. Um, so for example, if you like me, I'm a marketing officer for CTD, and if I wanted to showcase my storytelling skills through my experience section, one thing that I would do is take out like my bullet points and kind of tell my story of what I did in CTD as if it was a story. I don't know
Yeah.
if that made sense, but
It's more of one of those skills that they're not going to ask you like how can you tell stories or
mhm,
experience telling stories, but it's one of those things you just want to show. So whether
yeah,
that's like a little description of yourself at the top of your resume that tells your story getting into design, or if it's the way you've written your bullet points. So like if you intern somewhere, you write, tell it more as your story there and everything you did. There's like little things here and there, but it's more of like one of those skills. Is there any other questions? Also, for all the mailing list stuff, we'll be sure to add you guys. No problem. That was a fun three-part one. um, okay, so this is I personally, so I made my resume in Figma originally, but I was just getting very pixel perfect, if you know what I mean, where I just wanted everything to be exactly aligned this way. And it was just, it was taking too much time being realistic. And so I ended up redoing my resume in Pages, Apple Pages, aka like their boot, like their version of Microsoft Word. Really random, but I just found it easier, which is crazy because I use Figma so much. Like literally these slides are on Figma, but I know it's goes through scanners okay, and I just have it easily there. So that's what I used. What do you use?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I used Figma as well, but I know like a lot of people also use Illustrator, which is
Mm.
free because we are doing remote learning for UCSC students. So if you want to play around with that, that's also a good resource. And I know Figma also has, some community plugins and resources that you can use to build your resume. So you
Yeah.
don't have to do it from scratch. You can just kind of use those templates.
Yeah. I also heard that they have that Adobe Illustrator has
They
templates as
do.
well. So there's templates everywhere. I use a template from Pages and I just change the fonts and everything. So
Yeah.
someone asked what platform do you guys use to build your portfolio? I used Webflow to build mine. Um, I just liked it because it gave me a lot more customization options. It's a little bit expensive in my opinion, but I've been enjoying it so far.
Yeah. We definitely do have an Illustrator workshop coming soon for the question that was asking about Illustrator. Um, but yeah, there, like someone said,
Workshop.
there are a lot of, what'd
Oh,
you say?
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just was gonna say that the Illustrator workshop is actually part of workshop week. So
Yes.
yeah.
I didn't know the exact date, but yeah, there are a lot of templates that you can use that'll like get you started on it. And then once you learn a lot more like skills, you can kind of customize it a little bit more. What are your thoughts on building your folio on Figma? I think it's really cool. There is like a new, for those of you that don't know, there's a new Figma web development plugin type thing. So
I
you
think
can,
it's on figside.com.
yeah,
And so,
figside.com. And you can basically build your portfolio on Figma and then turn it into a website, which is really cool. But I haven't like explored it too much to actually learn everything on it yet. But
yeah, I think maybe we could do a workshop on that in the future, CTD. Personally, I want to switch so bad because it looks so cool and it's like very cheap. It's like $5 a month versus the 15 I'm paying for Webflow. Plus, I I don't know what I think you did this too, where first you mapped out your portfolio on Figma and then so
yeah,
it's just like I could just use that. Like I could have my portfolio up so much sooner.
yeah. I just realized I never answered the first question, but I also used Webflow to build my portfolio. I'm still kind of like editing mine, but I think it would be really cool to just like have everything in Figma because I designed it first in Figma and then I did it in Webflow.
Someone said, "What are your thoughts on using resume templates instead of starting from scratch?" Honestly, at first, I was really like, "I'm a designer. I'm gonna build it from scratch. I don't need these templates." But it took so long, and I was just obsessing over the smallest things instead of focusing on the content. And so I just ended up using a template, and I prefer it because it has the spacing of everything I want. I can change it if I want it. Like if I want to change something, I can change it. But at least I had a starting point. So I say go for it, but that's just me. What about you, Nidhi?
Yeah, I think you should definitely start with a template. If you just have a typical resume right now, like templates are definitely a good place to start. And then in the future, if you have any different ideas, then you can kind of explore there. But like even me, like I just kind of looked at what resumes I liked online and then designed it based off that. But that's kind of just essentially using a template, but making my own spacing and everything too.
I'm seeing a lot of people said that they used Canva or they looked at templates on Canva and then made their own version on Figma, which is great. I
Yeah.
know I spent like an hour one day going through all the templates on Canva trying to find like the perfect one, and then I got angry and I was like, "Ugh, this isn't gonna work." But they have some really nice ones. Like they have ones for design as well, so it's really great.
Yes, what Musuma said as well, finding portfolios on or finding portfolios you like on Cofolios and then looking at that resume. That's what I did as well. And
Me
I
too.
found that really helpful too, especially like I said, if you're looking for a specific job, it's really cool to look at what the people in that job currently are doing.
Yeah, in general, Cofolios is so helpful,
Mhm.
just because it gives you so many. like so many resources to kind of look at, kind of just ideas of what other people are doing and, can bounce off of them. Oh, Sai shared a sketch template for resume. That's really helpful. Thank you, Sai. Okay, if there's any other questions, real quick, I feel like seems like we're good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you guys ever have any questions, you're totally free to message us in Slack too. Like we'll always respond to your questions and we can share all the links that we've put in this presentation as well. Oh, this
Ooh,
link to the
I
Slack.
can drop a link to the Slack real quick right now. Yes. Okay, adding this real quick to the chat so everyone can get a link to join. In our Slack, we share the Zoom links and everything, just like our mailing list, but it's a little less formal. So if you have questions, you can easily ask any of the officers. They all have light bulb logos next to their name and just like actually have a real conversation because email can feel a little formal sometimes. So, alrighty, I'm going to stop sharing.